Hello and welcome to my final project. My name is Ariana Sepulveda. This project is due December 18, 2020 for History 94 with Professor Tintino, Fall 2020 at UCLA. My final media project will be discussing Coach Inc. and Company, referring to specifically a handbag and how it re-envisioned the image and sophistication of a United States woman during the 1939s to 1980s. I will specifically be talking about the late 1930s and also the early 1980s. So the historian that I will be relating to is Voltaire. He was born in 1694 between 1778 when he passed away. Voltaire was part of the Enlightenment movement in Europe during the early 17th century. So he was part of the movement that had a greater sensibility, a new sense that was being transitioned to. The most notable pieces of his work are Age of Louis and The Age of Manners, Customs, and Spirits in the Nations. His most notable work was part of the importance of literature, so he was very in part in creating a really good sense of what literature stood for and literature and language and text as the most important form of a custom of really digging into history. He treated the whole range of cultural history, artistic, scientific, and social as well as political, which he is referring to is a cultural history as artistic as within the context of literature. He saw literature and writing as artistic. It served as scientific because it was proven through the literature of manuscripts, the literature of writing, of hard context of the text. And it kind of did go into a political sense. Literature wasn't always seen as just hard evidence. It played a huge role in the political side of the Enlightenment movement. To Voltaire, he generalized history into two. One, history as true. Two, history that is fabulized into being false. Kelly 442. One history is true, the other history is false. There's no in between. True history is linked to the evidence of context, of writing, of literature. It can be written down. It is written down. It is written down to be proven. It is written down to have significance of the integrity of being important, the integrity of showing that this is what it is, this is what history has happened, and this is how it is proven through historians' context, through text. The other is just fabulized into being false. So orally, any other type of history is fable. It's not true. It's insignificant. He also divided into sacred and profane. As I mean sacred, he is defining it through the actions of God. So he also had an idea of religion and how it kind of did play into history's context. He did not dismiss this. So sacred is defined through true actions of God. Kelly 442. Voltaire discusses the deep past, but focuses on the recent past as accounts that were first formed was passed down orally, increasing the degree of probability. Which I mean here is that in history, starting from the deep past, it was passed down orally. It was passed down traditionally through mouth to mouth, to hearsay to hearsay. It was not passed down through written history. It was not passed down through articles referring to history written down in books and passages. It did not have any real significance within being passed down orally. So Voltaire did not think that orally something could be historicized and be given true. He linked this as being a fable, something that is kind of made up here and there, can possibly not be true. So it did have a degree of probability. The deep past is weak because most of it was told in fables passed down word to word, which is not hard evidence. This is what I was referring to, as Voltaire did not see oral accountabilities as being true. It was either true or fabulized in his eyes. As we continue the historical style of Voltaire, there is only one way to know what certainly something of ancient history, and this is to see if any incontestable monuments remain. Kelly, page 443. Voltaire quotes this and is referring to something that ancient history is true is by being incontestable, that the monuments do remain. The monuments referring to written linguistic history. He wanted hard evidence. He wanted the history to be written down. Yes, we could say that historians could be writing down something that is untrue, but he saw this as a starting point, as the marking point of history. The more deep we go in history, the more unreliable it is. Again, we see history as being in the deep past. He did recognize the deep past, but he saw it as orally passed down traditionally, and he marked this as unreliable. It related to fables. True history began between the Greeks versus Persian as science evolved by the printing press and the evidence of historians had to use to write history rather than just producing fables. The printing press was part of the scientific history of the Greeks and Persians as it was first invented during this time. So, Voltaire relates the historians' writing of using the printing press as a starting point of history, the starting point of true history rather than fables. Next, the art of writing created factual history. Again, Voltaire relates writing as to history, the art of history. It is a factual history. Art of writing created factual history. Recent hard factual history through proof of writing. Exactly, recent is related to the proof of writing. The more recent something is, the more it was involved with the science of writing. So it is being proved through the historian style of writing. Lastly, science is linked to his style of history from the evolution of the printing press. To finish off the quote, so the evolution of the printing press and the faithful histories were produced. Remember, faithful history was related to religion, which Voltaire saw as true. Faithful history was the sacred, which is the actions of God, what also was true. But it was even more true from the printing press and the invention. To continue, we'll be introducing the first quote by Voltaire from the Kelly book. It reads, "There is a history of opinions, which is only the collection of human errors, a history of the arts, perhaps the most useful of all, when it joins the knowledge of invention and the progress of arts to a description of their working. A natural history, improperly called history, and actually an essential part of physical science." Kelly, page 442. Voltaire is referring to opinions are false because they are human oral accounts, not true. When he states human errors, he is referring to the human errors that they make by not writing down history, by passing it down orally to their opinions. He also emphasizes the history of arts, perhaps the most useful of all, when it joins the knowledge of invention progress. The progress he was referring to is the printing press, which allowed history to be passed down through context of text and linguistics, not orally, which made it true because remember he thought true was proven through the context of text, and this is allowed through the progress of the inventions of the printing press. Also, he ends a quote with the natural history improperly called history. So natural history, the natural history being the deep past, the natural history being what has naturally already occurred, that is just naturally happening, and it hasn't been contextualized, it hasn't been in any context, so it's improperly called history, and is actual and essential part of physical science. The physical science with this It is the progress of the printing press, is a progress in inventions that has progressed through the invention of linguistics, through context, through writing down history. The second quote that I'll be introducing by Voltaire, it states, "It was at the end of the 15th century that the New World was discovered, and soon after the political form of Europe and the arts took a new shape. The art of printing and the restoration of the scientists finally proves fairly faithful histories instead of ridiculous chronicles assembled in cloisters from the time of Gregory of Tours. Every nation in Europe soon had its historians. Former poverty was transformed into prosperity. There was no city that did not want its own particular history. We are overwhelmed with immunity. A man who wants to be informed is obliged to follow events and to notice all the facts which he comes across. He sees the multitude of revolutions, the spirit of times, and the manners of peoples. He must attend above all the history of its country, study it, possess it, reserve it for the detailed study, and to cast a more general glance at the nations. And their history is interesting only for the relations that they have with us, for the great things they have accomplished." Kelly 444. So, when he states a history as an art, he is relating writing, linguistics to art and the greater good it had become with the inventions of the printing press. Voltaire is stating arts took a new shape by the new history that is now written down. Sciences are finally in restoration by being fairly now faithful instead of ridiculous history. He is also mentioning everyone wants a part of the new contextual style of history, but this could only be attained by studying the true history carefully and then much details that it takes for it to be true. This will accomplish the true and factual greatness of history. Thesis and argument. My thesis states the luxury handbag brand Coach Company has contributed to the diversity and gain independence of women through advertising, the evolution of ideal, sophisticated, ambitious pictured women by the style and accessibility of each unique leather handbag in the U.S. during World War II and post-war. My arguments are how did Coach evolutionize women independence through a handbag? What did women lose in giving into a luxury brand and purchasing a handbag? What did she gain from owning this newfound sense of technology? Coach history and background. Coach Inc. Company was first founded in 1941 on 34th Street in Manhattan, New York, by 6 leather craftsmen in a studio complex. It was a family-run operation in the beginning. CEO at the initial launch time was Todd Kahn. It was originally only meant to produce leather wallets and billfolds for men, so it was not in a broader sense of women and men. It was just directly wanted the consumer to be for men. It was male-based consumer product. Kahn and Miles were the designer producers during the 1950s and pushed for women leather handbags to be made in addition to men accessories. Producing the leather handbags off of the well-crafted baseball gloves. So baseball gloves were really well crafted. It took a lot of work to craft these baseball gloves, and Miles and Kahn wanted to produce women handbags off of these baseball gloves that were very sturdy, long-lasting. I mean, they took a baseball glove and really initiated into a handbag from all of the push and grabs that a baseball glove can take from a fastball. In 1961, Kahn and Miles bought the company from Todd Kahn, then hired Bonnie Cashin as she designed new handbags with additional coin purses, side pockets, and brighter colors. The significance of this historical object. During the initial launch of the handbags, World War I was in the midst of war. Women were pushed into the workforce as all men were across in the Atlantic and the Pacific. By earning their own money and becoming independent, the empowerment movement from the domesticated wife into the workforce was born. Women gained a new sense of independence, style to earn their own money, Coin purses and styles were linked to the minting of the new sophisticated working woman. After the war ended, it allowed women to continue to earn their own money and join the workforce alongside of men. In 1960s, women earned the right to open their own personal bank accounts without a husband. This was a new idea. It wasn't modern, and this was the modernity of having a woman be independent and earn her own money and reimagining and reimaging what a woman can do. This pushed the need for personal handbags for women with a room for a wallet and side pockets. By 1963, the United States passed the first legislation allowing equal pay for equal work. Coach ads advertising new stylish handbags during the early 1960s, identifying a stylish handbag alongside with the working woman. In this slide are different advertising of the Coach leather bag in different eras. So the first all the way to the left is a 1974 school bag clutch. Right below it is a slim pouch, 1978. 1978 also produced the brief bag, which was really induced with the working force for women. Right next to it, in the big beige, is Coach leatherware, just a general advertising in the spring of 1982. Right next to it is a new classics in the Coach tradition, adding colors, a little bit of different leather infused colors. It was a new classics. Right next to it, or right behind it, it was evolving into an iconic bag. It kind of was like the next step into real iconic identity of Coach. They later then really used different kind of style products using cloth, not just leather. They kind of re-advertised their luxury bag a bit. And then finally, the Willis bag in 1993 is accompanied by the Coach. I don't know if you could really see it, but it accustomed to the Coach tag, the Coach tag that had been impressed by the leather and was continued from the early stages of the 1950s first launch of the bags. I also just want to give a great thanks for Professor Titino and the fellow TAs for doing such a great work of teaching this class and really giving me a good sense of sensibility of a new perspective, a new understanding of history in the eyes of historiography, from recent to deep past, contemporary historiography. So I just really want to give a great thanks to you guys.